Okay, we're taking a look at. I like the material better this week in this other book. Um, so we're looking at which one am I in? Let's see, what page am I on? I'm on 92. We're in programming in C#, exam reference 70.483. Oops, 92. And it talks about exception handling. And I never really covered exception handling in much detail in C#. You really don't see it covered much in the game development, though it is an important feature. Things are going to go wrong. So how do you program it such that your program doesn't crash, for example? I think a lot of their examples are based upon the console, but I'll have you extend that and add some of this into an ASP.NET application. Like here, this shows you an example. We have a string, and then you're trying to convert that string into an integer. This would be like in an ASP.NET application. You have a text box on your screen, and you're bringing that in, and you're trying to convert it to a number, for example. Okay, so string s equals to not a number. So like this. If I run it, it crashes. So it gives us an error, system format.exception, input string was not a correct format. Even worse, if I was running it outside of Visual Studio, it wouldn't even bring it up in this user-friendly manner. Now, stop that. S, and I believe I can do an S is equal to console.readline. Like that. And this is how you bring in from the text, the text box. You have your text box name dot text. It comes in as a string. I better put something here. Console.writeline. All right. Input number. And if I run that, comes up an input a number. If I put 3 in there, works just fine. And if I run it again and put like David in there, that's where it crashes. Now notice the error that pops up, system.format exception. We'll come back to that. Okay, it throws an exception of the type format exception when the string is not a valid number. Throwing an exception halts the execution of application. Instead of continuing the following line, the runtime starts searching for a location which you handled exception. And usually doesn't come up with a very nice message for the user. Somebody's sitting there trying to read this, doesn't understand what's going on. They just know it's broke. Our goal is to intercept that and put something a little bit more user friendly. Okay, so we got our string S console read line. There's not this might be a false statement, but there's not a whole lot can go wrong there. So you're reading something in. Now, if your string dot is null or white space of S, then break. This would be if I pressed enter on it and maybe didn't input anything. I don't know about white space. I don't know if that means a space bar. Might. But this just right here causes it to break. Now, that's not necessarily a great thing. But what this is going to do is it'll keep doing this while it's true. That's nice. Man, maybe I'll type it in. Okay, while true. You may be sitting there wondering, well, while what's true? Exactly. Just true in general. It's not comparing a variable. That's why the break has to be there of some sort. Okay, so string S equals console.readline. Yeah, string dot is null or white space. Indicates whether the specified string is null, empty, or consists only of white space characters. S, so you have to specify which one. Then if that's true, then I want to break. Otherwise, we got a try statement here. Put our curly braces there. And integer I is equal to int dot parse of S. Break. Then we got our catch. Then format exception. Console.writeLine. And 0 is not a valid number. Please try again. Comma S. Okay, so now I'm going to run it. And then I'll explain what it's doing. And it's not prompting us for anything, but it's waiting for us to put a number in. Put David in, says David is not a valid number. Please try again. If I put semicolon is not a valid number. Please try again. If I put 3 in, then it goes ahead and finishes. Now I'm going to put white space in because I am curious about that. Well, that's what I thought. But then I was thinking, well, why couldn't you program for that? Yeah, sure enough, white space is spacebar. But press enter. Okay. You might come back to that. I'm not sure if I like how that's programmed. How this works is this, of course, gets the input from the user. Then this try means that everything within this try, it'll go ahead and do. Now, if something breaks in that, it tries to do this parse right here, then it'll come down here. It won't do any more lines of code after that. It'll come down here to this catch, and it'll look for that exception that broke. And then it'll handle the appropriate code inside that exception. Now, oftentimes, I'm not able to guess what the error is. So what I do is I deliberately try to break it. So let's try to put spaces in there and see what kind of error message it is. So press a couple spaces, press enter. It's not a valid number. That's format exception 2, I guess. Interesting. So I don't know why in their example they had that first one, because it isn't necessary. First one just causes it to break. Okay, so how would I use this then? Well, you have one of these for each one of your variables you're bringing in. Now you could put this into a different location. And let's see if I come up here, public void check integer input. And I'll be bringing string in, string s. And I don't want a public void because I want to return an integer if it works. But I could even return a Boolean, if there's something wrong. I'm not sure the best way on that. This might just go out and check to see if there's anything wrong. It might not actually do the conversion at that point. Let's see if I can program that. Okay, so while true, string s is equal to console.readline. I don't want that there, because I'm bringing that in from the main program. Really, the while isn't necessarily true here. I don't know how to do this, to be honest. I don't usually program in that. Let me go over to something a little bit more recognizable. Windows Form app. And you'd use this same code for the ASP.NET program. Yes. The DOS world is a different thought process. Okay, so I'm gonna bring in. I know where my toolbox is. View toolbox. Okay, so I'm going to bring in input from a text box. And I need a button and maybe a label. And I think I'll put another label at the bottom for like an error message. Although you could do it different ways. Okay, highlight all those, maybe make them a little bit bigger. So go to my properties. And font, I'll expand and make this 20. Okay, that's a little better. Okay. Change that to a. I'm going through this kind of fast. I assume you feel comfortable with this. Okay. Okay, alphabetical. There it is. I don't know why I couldn't see that. So bring in a number. And click calculate. And this will be our error message. So I need to give this a meaningful name so I can wrong package. Name it over here. TB underscore number 1. This one I'll give a name. I'll call this LB error. That's where I'll put my error message. And I could make it invisible to begin with. So come down to invisible, shut it off there. So when I run it, get this. It looks like it has a little bit of issues there, but that's okay. Now I'm going to program the calculate. And I'm bringing in that information. So I need a string. S is equal to TB underscore number 1 dot text. Shouldn't need to do any kind of conversion since that's still a string at that point. And this is where I want to check to see if it has some issues. So maybe I'd have a public boolean check integer input. And I'll pass in an integer. I want to pass in a string. That doesn't like about that. Not all code pass return value. Oh, okay. Because I don't know it's an integer yet. So that's why I'm passing it as a string. Now, I'm going to incorporate part of this. We don't need to keep doing while true because we're not going to ask them over and over like in a console application to re-enter the number. But we need our try in here. So I'm going to have a try. And then I also need my catch down here. Catch, format, exception. And here I'm going to try to change it to an integer. int_i is equal to int.parse of my num. Now over here they had a break, and I don't need that break because I don't necessarily want to break out of this. But if there's a problem, then down here I want to print LB underscore error. That was our label. Text is equal to format exception. And I'll come back and give that something a little bit more meaningful. Okay, now this is going to return a Boolean. So up here, I'm going to declare a Boolean. And I'm going to say, is it okay? And I can set it equal to true to begin with. Now, this line runs. Assuming it doesn't break up, the next line would be run. Now I could, and I'm going to do it here just to really demonstrate it, is it okay is equal to true. So I can set it equal to true. So instead of initializing it up here, you don't even actually need that there. I could say that. Now, if it doesn't convert correctly, then it'll blow up, and it'll come down here to my catch format exception, and I can change the label there. And I can say, is it okay equals to false. And then down here, I can return, is it okay? So this is going to do our checking, at least for format exception. So I got my S here. I'm going to come down here and I'll check if, whatever that is called, check integer input. Check integer input. I'll be passing in S. Now, I really want it to be self-documenting. So if I put check integer input okay, then that'll tell me it's okay. Because that's what true means. True means it's okay. Well, in the process, I have to put the okay here. Okay, so if it's okay, then I want to convert it. So int num1, num2, I'll add the numbers together just to have something to show. So I'll say num1 is equal to int dot parse and s. Now it doesn't do anything real exciting at this point, but will eventually. If we run this, if I put 3 in here, click calculate, it doesn't really squawk. If where I was supposed to put a number, I put my name, you click calculate. Should have changed my error message, but my error message is hidden, so I need to make it visible. So up here, where I set that, I could then say lb underscore error dot visible is true. Excuse me. Then start it. Trouble sleeping last night. I worry because I live about 30 minutes away. I always worry when it's snowy and icy. And you see format exception. Now that's not very user friendly to the user. So actually, what I'd want to say besides format exception is maybe I'd say you did not input a number. If I run that, I put some kind of says you do not input a number. Now, what would really be good is if maybe I put the cursor back in the blank. There's even a way to select all of the characters in the blank, but to be honest, I don't think I remember how to do that. But I can do I can change the focus on this. Now, there's going to be a problem with that. Is if I do it right here, I want to make this generic enough so I can use it for my other input. And if I hard code my text box 1 here, then it's not going to be generic enough. So down here is where I would do an else. And I'd say, what's it called? TB text box num1 dot, it's either set focus or focus. Must be focused. Focus equals true. We'll probably come back later and spice that up a little bit. Like something there. TB underscore num1 dot focus is a method, not a property. Okay. So if I put David here, and just to make sure, you see I don't have the focus on there, I did a tab, so I'm down here, and then puts my focus back there. Just for, see if I can find it real quick. Code to highlight all the text in a text box. C#. Oh yeah, that's it. Selection start is equal to 0. Selection length is equal to that. Okay. Let's see, I want to there. Focus might not be too bad, but this might get around it. And TB number 1, selection start. TB number 1, selection length is equal to TB number 1 dot text length. Okay. If I run that, I'll put David in here, come down here, press that. You see it not only gave me this message, but then highlighted what was in my box to say there was an error. Grab a drink here. Let me try to cause it to blow up. I don't know if I'll have any luck. Helps if I click it, if this would reset, just so I know it was a new error or not. But I didn't see it crash, so how can I get it to crash? I don't put anything in the blank. Let me try that. Well, so if I put spaces. Well, there is a whole bunch of exceptions available. So keep in mind that there's a lot more than just what I have here. And how you'd handle it is you'd put a bunch of catches down here. Okay, let me try to type an exception. Yeah. Oh yeah. Encoder fallback exception, entry point not found exception, execute engine exception, field access exception, index out of range exception. That's for variables. That's for arrays. Insufficient memory exception. So you can program how to handle that. All of these are possible exceptions you can call. Now, you don't sit there and program 200 exceptions for each input. So you try to anticipate what's the most common thing. You know, if it's a memory issue, why program that? If you're working for a company, who would want to program it? Well, if I was Microsoft, and maybe I anticipate that this might happen with people with under 4 GB of RAM or under 1 GB, for example. Well, then I put code in here to handle it appropriately. Tell them to go buy a new computer or something like that, or restart their computer. Then those maybe 50,000 people that fall in that category are no longer calling Microsoft whenever it blows up. So they have to do a lot more planning than I've ever had to do in my life, which I'm glad of. I don't want to work for Microsoft. I don't want to anticipate everything possible. Does that make sense on the exception? Okay. Now I'm gonna put one more, and then we'll go back to the book, and we'll look at some other topics. Common controls. There it is. And text box. And I'll give this a name. TB underscore number 2. Give that a label, number. Not there. Text. Don't remember what size I made those. 20. So highlight those. Those are 20. There we go. Now in our calculate, notice how I put this code into a separate method so it's easy to call. So I can actually copy this. Okay, so at this point I'm going to set S equal to my TB underscore number 2. That's my second input. This is going to go in and check that. I want to assign it to num2 if everything's okay. And down here, set those equal to number 2. That. So now if I run it, I'm going to show you one more error code. But if I put numbers in here, oops, no problem at all. But if I put that, then it comes up, tells me do not input a number and highlights appropriate blank. Like that. Okay. Now I'm going to do my actually I don't want to sum. I want to divide. The divide. So down here, my error correction's okay. They're numbers. They convert the integers just fine. Now part of the issue here though is that if it blows up, if I come right down here, it's going to access num1 and num2. Different ways you can handle that. I can set a flag indicating that everything's fine. Boolean, everything is fine. And I'll set that true to begin with. Now, if something blows up, like this else here, then I'll say everything is fine is equal to false. And down here, I'll say everything is fine is equal to false. So down here, when I'm getting ready to do my division, I'm going to say if everything is fine, now I want to do a try since I'm going to do a divide. Well, I don't want to do it. So I want it to do wrong to begin with. Equals num1 divided by num2. And then we'll write that back out. So what didn't I like about that? Use of unassigned local variable. Num1 is equal to 0, num2 is equal to 0. Now that 0 there has nothing to do with the error we're going to get. I'm actually going to put 0 in for the num2. So then I'll say that my L or TB underscore the LB underscore helps if I actually have a blank for some. What am I doing? Okay, I'll call that LB or division, I guess. LB underscore division. So LB underscore division dot text is equal to, and I'm going to mix this up with other languages. Java's different. I don't remember what C# is. ToString. Okay, so let's run this. Four, 2, divides it. If I put Dave in here, it says you did not input a number and it didn't try to divide it. If I put 0 in there, just blew up when I did this division. Specifically, notice what it says, divide by 0 exception. So down here, I want to try, and I put a beginning curly brace. Copy those up here. And then we'll do a catch and divide by 0 exception. So you tell it exactly what kind of error happened. And then I can say LB underscore error dot text equals to second number cannot be 0. So we'll run that. And obviously that still works just fine. I do that. Gives me integer division. That's a different issue. Put a 0 in there and it says second number cannot be 0. So, and also I'd want to probably set the focus to that that blank. So since I'm going to be setting focus to that blank fairly often, then maybe I want to tell it what to set the focus to in a method. Don't know if I'll get this right or not. We'll try. Public, and I'm going to say void set error focus object sender. And here's my code right here. Can't see my cursor. There it is. So I'll copy that, put it up here. Now, what I'm hoping I can do is I'm hoping I can just put an object here. I I probably have the wrong idea on that. Obviously I do. Object does not contain definition for focus. Text box. Let's try text box. Assuming that text box. Okay. Except for I call it sender. 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 And sender. I really thought object would work. This might not work. Let's see. So then down here, what I call it? Set error focus. So, and here I say set error focus TB underscore number 1. I'm going to comment those out. There we go. And run this. Did not input a number. See, I didn't have anything in here, and it tried to set the focus to that. But that code is working now. So I can delete that. And down here then, set error focus TB underscore number 2. So then down here, where I got divide by 0, set our focus there. Okay, so if I run it again, 3, 0 in here. Did not. Oh, I didn't make it visible, did I? So LB underscore error dot focus. Not focus. Visible is equal to true. Now this would all, in theory, probably you would even put this in a separate, so you could call it over and over, just passing the error, and then it would set it to visible. Sometimes you can go overboard with handling that. Second number cannot be 0. It highlights it, so that's good. Do that. Okay, it does 1. Dave here. Like that. Can deny to put a number. Put Dave here. And all of a sudden, I really made this a lot more error proof. Deny to put a number. See how I can't hardly break it now? Now you can do a generic catch at the end that even helps more on that. Okay. This gives you an example, which I've just been showing you. Here's where you have more than one exception. Argument null exception, format exception. The finally clause down here is where it'll go through, do this, and then finally do this. That's different than putting everything in the try, because a catch may still catch something, but then it'll come down here and do the finally. Let's see, try, finally, program complete. They give you some system exception properties that you can access. If you're wondering, well, what's that referred to? Let's see if they got an example. You see how you can do format exception E? This E, then you can query. This isn't necessarily for the user. This might be something to make your life a little bit easier. And these are what you can query. So like this divided by 0 exception, I can put an E here. And then instead of putting this message, second number cannot be 0, you do E dot. And see, those are the different, here's a message pops up, describes the current exception. Here's a source, gets or sets the name of the application object that causes the error. Stack trace, target site. I had a program at Visual Basic that I did not, or at Coke, that I programmed Visual Basic that I did not put the appropriate effort into the exception handling. And there was part of the program that would break every so often and it would tell them file not found. And nowhere in my program could I see where it was trying to locate a file. So I wasn't opening a file where they were describing it. If I had, and I don't think I knew anything about exception handling when I started at Coke and was programming Visual Basic, because that was Visual Basic 1.0, that was a long time ago. And since I didn't know anything about it, I didn't put any exception handling in there. Maybe they didn't have any. And it made it very difficult. I never could figure out the whole time I was there why that was breaking. So this stuff is, it sounds like, well, it's kind of trivial, but it really is important important information here. Okay. Exception. Source. Okay, so I'm going to put source in there instead of that message. And I'll start this. Or I won't. I'll do wrong. Exception E. Going to be declared in this scope because that name is used in enclosing local scope to define a local or parameter. I thought that's how you put it. Put an E in there. Unless it's there by default now. Let's try that. No. Well, that's interesting. Format exception E. I've used that before, but I thought that I put an E right up here. Maybe when you do a specific one, you can't do that. Huh. No, there it still doesn't look it. Enclosing local scope to define a local or parameter. You can do just a generic exception. I don't know about that E. Maybe we'll find where it describes it later on. Of course, I haven't didn't write anything to it. Maybe I don't know. Do it right here, but they do it for format exception, but that shouldn't matter with error. Format exception. What's wrong on that then? It shouldn't matter that I'm in the Windows version. This works across the board. This is how you do exception handling in C Sharp. Let's see. I already looked at that. Throwing exceptions. When you want to throw an error, you first need to create a new instance of an exception. You can use a special throw command keyword to throw the exception. After this, the runtime will start looking for catch and finally blocks. It shows you how to throw an exception. So if string.is null or white space of the string that's brought in, then you can throw new argument null exception in file name is required. This is where you don't want to let it break, but you're sensing a problem yourself. They're supposed to put something in for file name, and they're leaving it as white space or not putting anything in. Okay, and let's see. Here's they do that format exception EX again. Here's those error messages, what you try to program and so forth. Again, I find it easiest to try to break my program and then program for just those. For example, for invalid cast exception. Let's see what it does if we put a decimal in there. See, it just very generically said he did not input a number. That would be confusing to somebody. I could put something in there where maybe I try to change it to a double or something else. Okay. So then, let's see, popular exceptions in .NET framework. The exception is kind of the generic one. That's a base class. Says try avoid throwing and catching this exception because it's too generic. Because you don't know what went on. You might as well just, letting it just blow up anyway, it will not continue running the program. It'll actually crash. So yeah, putting an exception here is not a bad thing as your last one, just to catch everything else. You can create your own custom ones. Okay, so you see you got your colon exception here, serializable, and order processing exception. Got order ID, the help link. They don't give a main program demonstrating this, but the idea here might be that you look it up in like they enter in the order number, for example, the order ID, and you look it up in database perhaps, um, and you then program your own custom exception. So if it doesn't find the order ID, then we'll automatically run this. Now you might say, well, if you're going to look it up in a database, why don't you just check to see if it found anything? If it didn't find anything, then handle it in your code. The idea of putting a custom exception in here is you can make this such that then you can implement this across your organization. So that if somebody's looking up something in an order ID table, if it doesn't find it, then you'll always handle it consistently. Every programmer will program it the same way. Does that make sense? Okay. This would make more sense if they actually had an example where they used it, but they don't. I wasn't going to the next part, but I got 4 minutes left. This is talking about creating and using types. So I think we'll pick up on this next time because there's some useful items in here. Now, what I want you to do is I'll put a project out there, and I want you to do an ASP.NET, like we did that one day, and I want you to implement this same error checking. And in addition, I'm going to have you input not only an integer, a double, and a string, and then do something with them. For example, you could enter in 2 doubles and then do a divide. How do you think you could possibly break something like I haven't really programmed for yet? Type in words, or I could type in this huge number that will exceed the limits of an integer. I'm holding down my 6 right now. No, not an integer, but you probably write like on a double. See here I got an overflow exception. So I still don't have that in here. I can still break it. Now to your question, I don't know. It's a fairly small number. Integer is not really good for that. Oh, okay. Yeah, int by itself in C# range of values is even less. The int32, see this, int32? Is int just int32? I didn't think it was. But anyway, you see here, this is the only numbers that int32 will handle. Limit a range of integer values. Okay, I guess it is that. Boy, I was thinking it's smaller than that. But anyway, so anyway, I want you to program that in and handle, the different exceptions. If you're multiplying 2 doubles together, that can become too big. And all I'm going to do when I get your program is try to break it. So I'll sit there and do everything under the sun trying to break it. So I just want you to make your ASP.NET program such that you can't break it. And I want you to zip up the entire folder in that. Does that make sense what I'm looking for there? Okay. So I'll go ahead and stop that, and I'll stop the recording.